Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you all had an enjoyable lunch. It's hard to bring you out of the sunny weather, but I'm really glad to hear and see a full house. Welcome to everybody in the audience, but also welcome to everybody watching in online. My name is Matthew Fraser. I'm a director at Circle Economy, and we are co-organizing this session very happily with WeGo, Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, as well as the Circular Economy Coalition for Latin America and the Caribbean. We are extremely excited to have you here today. It's a terrific session. In fact, the very first session for which we're seeing an event on informal work at the Circular Economy, at the World Circular Economy Forum. So it's a very exciting and monumental day. Today we have an hour here together, and it's really jam-packed. It's a great agenda. In just a few moments, I will be inviting Sonia Diaz on stage. She will be giving a keynote address, Why Circularity Cannot Happen Without Informality. We will then have a video really hearing the first account from waste pickers from Portland in Oregon in the United States. Then finally, we'll have a very exciting panel hosted by Beatriz Martins-Carneiro and experts from multiple regions, including Latin America, Asia, and Africa. We'll also have the opportunity to have questions from you, so we're very excited to have an interactive session as part of this hour. And then finally, closing remarks from Severino Lima. He's the first elected president of the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. Without any further ado, I would like to welcome Sonia. She's a waste specialist at WeGo. She leads the work with waste pickers on a variety of topics, including climate, gender, and health in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, boa tarde. I will speak in English. Well, distinguished participants, it's a great honor to address such a diverse audience present for this panel today. I do so by stating it up front that there is no circularity without informality in the Global South. For centuries, waste has been a resource for poor workers, and it is still so today. While it's true that waste produced by contemporary societies is radically different from pre-industrial cities, the activity of waste picking in many low and middle-income cities in the world is virtually unchanged. The reality reflects prevalence of work in open dumps, in poor conditions on the streets, or even in rundown and makeshift sorting centers. Waste pickers continue to be subject to stigmatization and lack of social recognition. This is all exacerbated by increasingly punitive measures and by the tightening grip of urban legislation. These regulations penalize informal waste workers instead of integrating them into formal solid waste systems. Despite all of these structural barriers and lack of institutional support mechanisms, nearly 60% of the plastic recycled in the world is collected by informal workers. What we know and see is that in the Global South, circularity takes place because of the work and contributions of this environmental army. With pressing environmental challenges such as loss of biodiversity, plastic pollution and climate change, the transition towards greener, circular and climate-neutral economies and society is seen as critical. The pathway to a circular carbon-neutral economy in ways that are fair and inclusive to everyone while creating decent work opportunities has been at the center of debates and is commonly referred to as the just transition. Industrial restructuring, digitalization, and the pursuit of non-linear models requires the combination of circular economy policies with social protection measures to ensure that the burden of efforts to promote circularity, reduce plastic pollution, and combat climate change will not fall on the shoulders of the waste pickers. If so, this would worsen working conditions, increase health risks, threaten livelihoods, and even result in job losses for these workers. I would like to propose 5 pathways for a more integrated and inclusive approach to circularity. First and foremost, one key way to prevent this is to properly integrate local and contextual knowledge from the Global South, which to date has been neglected or sidelined in discussions on circular transitions. A second step is to acknowledge the critical role played by workers in informal employment in the circular economy by strengthening their organizations. This can be a pathway towards integrating inclusivity into circular economy systems, fostering empowerment, and contributing to crucial climate action. A third step is the design and implementation of inclusive extended producer responsibility systems with fair remuneration for waste pickers and extension of social protections. A fourth step would be to promote workers' access to climate finance, as this could help them cope with the impacts of climate change in their workplaces through the implementation of climate-sensitive work infrastructure. Lastly, a fifth actionable step would be for governments to officially acknowledge waste pickers as contributions to reducing greenhouse gases. In this sense, governments should integrate the modeling of waste pickers as contribution to achieve their national, regional, and locally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. Let us reimagine the circular economy as a tool for improving well-being, addressing inequality, and creating a just transition. Building green skills for and with workers in informal employment and creating inclusive systems will be key to placing formal livelihoods at the center of discourse and practice of circularities. To do this, we need to rebalance our priorities. We need to shift from circular economy solutions as a technological fix to the circular economy as a tool for addressing inequality, promoting well-being, and a just transition. This reorientation is essential given that the implementation of circular economy initiatives often fail to address existing inequalities, leading to further marginalization and displacement of workers in both the Global South and the Global North. Research, policy, and discourse must prioritize social sustainability and recognize the existing circular practices in the Global South. Practices that are often pro-poor, context-specific, and comprehensive. The development of technologies that are worker-friendly could help waste pickers as organizations work towards greater traceability, something important in circular systems. If we are truly to center the effective and ongoing engagement of all relevant stakeholders in the matter, we need to promote institutionalized participatory forums with governments, the private sector, and waste pickers to plan for climate adaptation and circular systems. As Louis Marx, a famous journalist, in his book, The Last Decade, warns us, this is the last decade where we can significantly lower the impacts of social and environmental collapse. I invite organizations within the circular economy ecosystem to join us in committing to an inclusive, people-centered circular economy. Thank you very much. Before we close, I would like to invite you all to watch a pre-recorded message from the waste speaker, Sonia Ladebird Birdwell, of the Alliance of Independent Recyclers, an affiliate of the International Alliance of Waste Speakers.
Hello, my name is Sonia. I'm a waste picker here in Oregon, United States. I work with Ground Score Association, which is a democratic membership-based organization of waste pickers. One of our greatest challenges in this region is the lack of recognition that waste pickers in the global north even exist. But waste picking is still common in North America. Despite that our industry is highly privatized, we still collect materials from secondhand goods that are recovered from dumpsters and curbs to scrap metals and sometimes cardboard. But the most important source for waste pickers is beverage containers in states and provinces with a deposit return system, which places a monetary deposit on beverage packaging that people can later redeem upon returning the empty beverage. Many consumers don't want to go through the hassle of returning the empty beverage containers, so they throw them away or leave them for us waste pickers, colloquially called canners in the U.S., or binners or valoristes. Canners likely make up the majority of the people returning cans and bottles. These systems are primarily designed for consumers, so there are usually convenient places like grocery stores to take cans and bottles for redemption. But often there are limits on how many beverage containers we can redeem each day. And often waste pickers aren't received very well by these places because we are wrongly stigmatized as dirty or homeless or drug addicts or all of the above. In some states, like New York, there is a handling fee, which has enabled waste pickers to organize and operate their own depot to receive beverage packaging and provide formal or semi-formal jobs for waste pickers. But the handling fee, which can only be increased through legislation, has not kept up with the operation of depots. Creates are not actually decently paid or supportive jobs. So even when we are able to formalize our work under these systems, it often isn't decent work. It took waste picker organization Coupe Les Valories 10 years to finally negotiate a handling fee from producers. Still, they are about to lose their indoor depot and don't know where they will move. Rent and land costs are incredibly high, and in our region, we aren't seeing the same investment from industry that we see in other parts of the world. In Oregon, there is no handling fee, so there is no incentive for anyone to run an independent depot. But waste pickers from Ground Score negotiated first with the city of Portland, then with distributors to fund us to operate our own depot. Called the People's Depot, we take pride in providing the service in a way that respects canning and brings dignity to our work. We do provide decent wages and benefits, but in doing so, lack funding to employ most of our depot workers for more than a few hours a day. So the work is formal, but still not decent. But because of our success in processing a lot of material, and because retailers like grocery stores prefer not take cans and bottles, retailers in our region have helped rally a growing coalition, including state and municipal level governments, industry and business groups, to find a way of our depot to receive more funding for more hours of work to serve more people. Despite all the challenges, the deposit return systems are essential for us. Having our own depot has enabled us to build a solid and dedicated team of canners who, by being integrated into the operation of our depot, have secured IDs, bank account, housing, and a formal job that meets us where we are at. It also has enabled us to collect better data about canners and advocate for the value and dignity of our work. This is helping us debunk the common stereotypes in canners. Most canners are spending their canning money on basic essentials like food, housing, and bills. Almost 70% of the canners who come to our depot have a disability and have been collecting cans for an average of 10 years. Most grew up in poverty. For most, canning is their only source of income. In North America, We have 4 organizations affiliated with the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, which has helped us understand and advocate around issues like extended producer responsibility. Beyond deposit return systems, EPR for packaging is largely not benefiting our organization in North America. Supposed innovations like plastics credits aren't even heard about here, and big producers are not investing in waste pickers in our region the way we see happening in other parts of the world. We need better circular economy policies and investment that count us too. So what is working well here? Policy that places fines on contaminated recyclables in Vancouver, BC, Canada has incentivized private contracting of the waste picker of organization Binner's project to top sort recyclables at apartments and other facilities. They also operate a flea market on property that the City of Vancouver provides. Waste Picker Redemption Center, Sure We Can, was able to purchase its depot lot thanks in part to a grant from New York State. In Oregon, city, county, and regional governments have supported Ground Score to provide waste and recyclables collection service in homeless camps and to launder all of the textiles that we collect. Textiles is the major portion of what we collect in the streets, and 99% of them are completely reusable as clothes. So we are diverting about 5 tons of textile waste from the landfill for reuse every month. Looking ahead to a more equitable, circular economy, waste pickers, but formal and informal, needs to be considered in the design of reuse policies investment. Because recycling and reuse without waste pickers is garbage.
Great, awesome. Thanks for the great contribution to Ground Score Association. Really great video, and also thank you very much, Sonia, for the very heartfelt and excellent speech that you gave just before that. It's really actually fantastic to see the global scope of informality being brought here to the World Circular Economy Forum. Moving on to the next part of the session, I'm very happy to hand it over for a panel discussion. The panel will focus a little bit more specifically on how circular transitions in the Global South can empower informal workers as equal partners using inclusive approaches. First, I would like to invite to the stage our moderator for the session, Beatriz Martins-Carnero. She is the management officer at UNEP and heads Circular Economy Coalition for Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Beatriz. Next up, we have Anderson Cooperlow Nassif. He is the president at the Association of Recyclable Materials Collectors. He promotes a social dialogue and inclusion of waste pickers that affect their livelihoods, but also proper waste management here in Brazil. Next up, we have Davina Milenge Uela. She is the chief program coordinator and lead of the CE initiatives at the African Development Bank. She does a lot in promoting the role of informal workers in regional member countries in Africa, but also really works through ASEAN and promotes circular commitments to end poverty in Africa. Welcome, Davina. Finally, we have Manija Anantharaman. She is assistant professor of sociology at Sciences Po in Paris. She does a lot of interdisciplinary research, very interesting work that explores inequality, justice, and the sustainability transition. Welcome, and I wish you a successful panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew. So, welcome to this panel on empowering informal workers, pathways for inclusive circularity. So, informal workers have historically driven circularity through reuse, repair shops, recycling, yet there are still challenges including them in circular economy strategies, as we've seen in the previous panelists. This panel will explore how circular transitions in the Global South can recognize and empower informal workers, positioning them, their inclusion as an essential element of any successful transition. The central question guiding this discussion is, what conditions are needed to ensure that workers in the informal economy are recognized and included as equal partners in shaping circular economy strategies, particularly through poor, context-specific and holistic approaches? Sorry, I am having some echo with the microphone. That's why I'm distracted. So we already have our panelists, so we will start the discussion with the first question to Manisha. Manisha, we know that in many parts of the world, including India, circularity, repairing clothing, reusing items, is part of everyday life. It's part of our culture, also here in Brazil. I am Brazilian, by the way. So can you tell us more about how this is part of a fabric of life and what role informal workers or micro-business play in these everyday circularities and in its challenges?
Thank you very much. So as you said, across cities and towns in India, but all across the Global South, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, you see practices of circularity taking place, right? So, of course, waste picking and reclaiming are important parts of this, but it's also about repairing clothes, repairing cell phones, repairing shoes. You know, I now live in France, but I save my things every time I go back home to India to get them repaired because it's much easier. Now, the problem is many of our policies around urban development and economic development have made these practices harder to sustain and persist. Why? Well, first and foremost, cultural narratives fail to see this work as skilled. It takes skill to repair. It takes skill to know what materials have values. But these skills are not really recognized and valued in workforce development policies. Rather, these are skills that are transmitted within family and community contexts. So in this situation, it's really the informal economy, small micro businesses that are sustaining these repair practices against the odds. Now, at the same time, as our cities have developed and expanded, real estate speculation, rising rents, the changing urban street life as you move towards highways and gated complexes, the people who offer these services are pushed out of the city. They cannot go inside a gated complex or a condo to offer a cobbler service. So this existing social fabric is disappearing, but it's not too late. It still exists, and this is an urgent task to first change the discourses around what sorts of work are considered valuable. Repair, refurbishment, recycling work has been considered unmodern, stigmatized, dirty, and valueless in the linear economy that has to change. Second, to actively support these practices through specific public policy initiatives. Today in Europe, across European cities, governments are offering repair bonuses, repair cafes. These things already exist in the Global South. We can leapfrog the throwaway linear economy, but for that, we need urgent action right now to stop these unsustainable urban development pathways through a coordinated territorial approach to support this everyday circularity and the social fabric of informality that it depends on.
Thank you very much. And also, part of this work of repair is done by women, right? And so it's part of the domestic work and it's not recognized, so as a value in itself. So thank you for that. So now moving to Davina. Davina, how can circular economy policies and partnerships be designed to better recognize and integrate informal workers, ensuring both environmental outcomes and improved livelihoods in the African context?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, as the African Development Bank and part of the African delegation for the Circular Economy Forum this year. We're really very pleased to be part of the engaging on this particular topic around the informal sector. Actually, as I was looking at the data, it says that over 80% of Africa's workforce is in the informal sector. And if we take that into perspective, that's basically only 20% of our workforce is in the formal sector. And so all that Ms. Diaz talked about, the lady from the US talked about, really lands for us. And so as the African Development Bank, it's very important to us to see and look at opportunities there is. First of all, that Africa will have the biggest labor force going to 2050. In fact, it says 25% of the world's labor force will be African. And so these dynamics have to change. Change in a way that is inclusive and participatory for these currently 80% of our labor force that is in the informal sector. Clearly, what that says is that we are not doing very well on SDG 8, on decent jobs and economic growth. And so what kind of policies and partnerships can we look at? Number one, there's recognition. We need to recognize the skills, indeed, from the informal sector. For sure, what they're doing drives economy. And the reason why that mass group of able-bodied, very skilled labor force is out of the formal economic path is a challenge, and really shouldn't be. And so recognition and inclusion is a key part of what needs to be done. Two is on proper scaling, ensuring that we have the right capacity building and targeted skilling for this group. And that comes with access to resources. And I speak as a member of the multilateral development banks, as MDBs. Normally, these are not our clients. And you can imagine, as the African Development Bank, 80% of the labor force is not your client. You can imagine the huge loss that we're not doing something about, the opportunity they're in. And so we need to recognize and tie resources, especially financial resources, to this group that is going to be the workforce for the future. We have to skill it for the future. And lastly, I would say that we need data and measurement. I'm picking these statistics, but they're not commonplace. So we need to ensure that at the financial sector, we have the right data. At national level, we have the right data, we have the right measurements to ensure that we actually are tapping into the resources in using the communities. I like that there's already an alliance of waste pickers. Let me just say that the informal sector is not just waste pickers. The informal sector is where our innovation is growing. A lot of digital innovations on the African continent are in the periphery. They're not registered. That could be speaking to the policies, the business registration practices on the continent. So we have a lot of lost, unseen knowledge in wealth resources that we want to or should bring to the mainstream. So maybe lastly, I'll say let's focus on the priority sectors. To make sure that we do the right data, we design policies that serve them best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Davina. Yes, it's a good start, right, for prioritizing in some sectors. And just for some context, informality here in Latin America and the Caribbean is around 60%, 2/3. So it's also very high. Agora eu vou mudar para o português. Anderson. Quais são os principais desafios dos catadores nos sistemas de economia circular? Você que tem bastante experiência aí nesse tema aqui no Brasil.
Bom, primeiramente, o desafio, um dos desafios, né, que não são poucos, está sendo vencido nesse exato momento, né? Os catadores se fazerem presente nesse painel já é vencer um dos desafios, né? Até porque a nossa categoria ainda é invisível, principalmente aos olhos de muitos, né? Eu acho que um desafio importante é dar visibilidade àqueles invisíveis, né? Que nesse exato momento estão contribuindo aí para essa transição da economia linear para a economia circular. Mas isso não tem acontecido pontualmente. Já há décadas, a gente já vem fazendo com êxito aí esse trabalho. E destaco aqui que a gente tem feito muito com muito pouco. Até porque muitas vezes somos questionados com relação à nossa eficiência, mas tenho certeza absoluta que poucos conseguiriam fazer tudo o que a gente já fez ao longo de todos esses anos. O que a gente precisa, obviamente, é fazer com que, primeiramente, no nosso país, no caso Brasil, que se cumpra principalmente a legislação que versa sobre a priorização nossa na cadeia de resíduos do país. Uma outra questão é a questão da falta de investimento com maior robustez. Obviamente que num cenário onde se tem 1 milhão de catadores, sejam nas ruas, nos lixões do país, nas cooperativas, associações, não pode conviver com investimentos pontuais. Até porque somos sabedores de que, desde que o mundo é mundo, existe desigualdade. Mas da forma que os catadores hoje trabalham, a desigualdade tende a ser acelerada, inclusive com perspectiva de soluções mágicas, imediatas, sem levar em consideração que por trás de toda a tecnologia, até que se prove o contrário, vai necessitar do ser humano. Então, a gente, inclusive no século XXI, na era da inteligência artificial, somos totalmente favoráveis a tecnologias, principalmente discutir com os catadores, mas somos sabedores de que sem a nossa força de trabalho é quase impossível fazer com que um assunto tão complexo se torne um assunto, aos olhos de algum, tão simples. Então, o recado inicial aqui é de que, através da nossa resiliência, da nossa perseverança, participando de eventos como esse, colocando os catadores no centro da discussão, é um caminho, obviamente, para que a gente consiga virar essa chave e continuar contribuindo para o desenvolvimento econômico, social e ambiental do nosso país, por que não dizer do sul global.
Excelente, Anderson. Muito obrigada. E na verdade, assim, o que eu conheço, né, um pouco do trabalho de vocês, os catadores são também um agente de educação ambiental, porque são os que estão na ponta mesmo, em contato com o consumidor. E, na verdade, a economia circular é feita das pessoas, não? As pessoas como consumidores, os trabalhadores, e eu acho que o catador sempre teve esse papel, pelo menos aqui no Brasil, pelo que eu conheço dos projetos, e acho que é muito importante também reforçar esse lado, não? So now let's go one step further. In the second round, we will focus on what needs to be done, what kind of training, support, or protection is needed to empower informal workers and ensure a just transition in the circular economy. Okay, sorry. So the first question will go to Manisha. So, Manisha, what are the main barriers and priorities towards working to ensure a just transition for informal workers in the circular economy?
Yeah, thank you. So when we talk about just and just transition, there are 3 elements we need to think about. The first one, like you said, Anderson, is recognition, right? So this moment, recognizing that if there is any reason we are not drowning in more waste than we already are, it's because of the informal economy. It's because of waste pickers. So the knowledge, the skills, the capacities, and also the exposure to the burden of linear economy being carried out by waste pickers and other members of the informal recycling sector, recognizing that. From there, procedural justice. Waste pickers have to be in the room when decisions are made. Representatives of informal recycling need to be in the room when decisions are made. This is not about designing a program and then saying, hey, come, we're coming to include you, but it's about co-development from the beginning. The third important element then is distributive justice, just remuneration. And I would even go as far to say redistributive justice. The people who have done the work of waste and waste picking have really lost out from the linear economy. This is a problem of poverty. So how can we address this issue of poverty and underdevelopment? And here I want to make one quick point about investment. You know, you hear a lot about investment in informality and investment in the informal economy. And I think for this investment to work, we need a reframe about what return on investment is. Investment in the informal economy cannot work on the basis of short-term business cycles with returns expected in short to medium term. But rather, this is investment in foundational infrastructures to repair the environment and reparation for inequality and injustice. That is a different orientation to investment. It also means the value you get back is not necessarily just monetary value, it's other types of value. It's environmental value. It's greater social cohesion. It's greater security. So changing the types of values we expect in return to this investment, I think, is another very important step of empowering the informal sector in the circular economy.
Thank you, thank you. It's societal values, right? So, thank you very much. Davina, considering the reality of the Global South, in your experience, what types of training are most needed to empower informal workers to actively participate in and benefit from transitions to the circular economy? And additionally, what forms of social protection or supportive initiatives do you consider essential to enable and sustain this participation?
Right. I think Nisha just pointed out some of them. Recognizing what they have in terms of skills, not having top-down approaches to what we assume they need to improve the work. And in that, trainings around capacity, some of them are called vocational trainings. Those targeted capacity buildings around training and resource or skills empowerment would be a good way to start to engage. But let me just point out what Ms. Diaz gave us. She left us with 5 pathways. I really took note. One was to recognize local knowledge. And so in designing support programs, we really need to input and indeed bringing them on the table and understanding what their needs. They've been in this space. They know what needs to be done. And so creating that space that their voices get heard is, I think, where we add value to the conversation. And then, of course, organizing. And platforms such as the alliances, circular economy alliances, both at a regional level, are very critical to get these voices heard. She also talked about the extended producer responsibility. I think that is critical to get the engagement going. She talked about access to climate finance, and then government recognition. So with all those 5 pathways, let me say what we've done on the African continent. So at the African Development Bank, we host the African Circular Economy Alliance. When we took it over, there were only 3 countries. We've grown it to 15 countries, plus strategic members. These are organizations that want to have an engagement with countries. So it is a safe space to engage, to learn together. And what that does, it enables that recognition to happen, that organization to happen, because oftentimes there's mistrust on both sides. So this is what the alliances, I believe the Latin America Alliance platform also does, is to create that space where both the public sectors and in this case also the voices of the informal sectors would be heard, so that there's organizing around common interests. The next one we did do was to accompany all this work with the facility, because ultimately the elephant in the room is financing. How do you structure financing to shape this? So the Africa Circular Economy Facility that was established is very new to us as well. It's as old as 2022. And the idea was to now try and align financing, because oftentimes owners of capital do not understand the waste pickers or the informal sectors or anybody in this space. And so having a financial institution that is trusted, such as the African Development Bank on our continent, de-risks that engagement. So what we need to do is to grow, use these trust fund resources to get the whole infrastructure running, get the public development banks or the financial institutions that really understand the opportunities for this market. 80% of the workforce is a huge market for any business developer. And who has a responsibility to do that? That's us as a public regional bank. And so what we are trying to do with that circular economy facility is to start with one on the policy side. So we are starting to support countries develop their circular economy roadmaps. Because even naming circular economy in the policy changes the dynamics. We didn't have that. We didn't have circular economy roadmaps. There was something about waste management, but it's not the same thing. So that there is now national roadmaps around circular economy. It opens up the space for financing. Two, we are promoting business incubation hubs in cities. So we have real physical setups for where SMEs get to be trained on how to drive circular businesses. And with that practice, we then will scale it up to middle level, to bigger vehicles that can be uptaken by channels such as what we have on the continent called Africa 50. It directs big infrastructure projects. And that's where we want to see circular programs get to. That is no longer a small-scale, informal sector business. It becomes mainstream. And so we need to build those vehicles through what we see, through organizing, and also through creating the necessary concessional financing, because you will need really patient capital to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you mentioned vocational training, but you mentioned that it cannot be top-down, and I think that you were totally right. Actually, the waste pickers, they have social technology that, in fact, needs to be scaled up. And I think this is a good segue to the question to Anderson. Anderson, o Brasil tem sido pioneiro na adoção de uma abordagem inclusiva na logística reversa. Então, quais são as principais características desse sistema que inclui cooperativas de catadores?
Bom, vamos lá. Embora posso aqui reconhecer, né, que a logística reversa no país teve alguns avanços, mas também nesse momento não poderia deixar de falar que não estamos, por um todo, contentes com os rumos que a logística reversa está caminhando. Eu acho que logística reversa, como um dos instrumentos da Política Nacional de Resíduos, ela não pode ser meramente mercadológica da forma que está sendo hoje. Eu acho que, antes de mais nada, essa correria quase que insana para cumprimento dos resultados de logística reversa, eu acho que tem um ponto importante, a responsabilidade das empresas, e isso eu acho que não podemos abrir mão, mas temos que saber que por trás desses resultados existem pessoas. Não me agrada e possivelmente não agrada a nossa categoria saber que a maioria dos catadores que colocam a mão em 90% de tudo que é embalagem pós-consumo no país, não tem recebido os mesmos 90% daquilo que os catadores fazem jus da logística reversa. Então, por aí, já não podemos dizer inteiramente que o país tem uma logística reversa inclusiva. De nada adiantará, no final de cada ciclo da própria logística reversa no país, muitos comemorarem ao final do ano, e aqui eu acho que cabe até um paralelo, né? abrindo e comemorando em grupos, né, com a melhor champanhe do mundo, sem saber de que forma que essa champanhe foi produzida. E, ao mesmo tempo, comemorar resultados da logística reversa, sem saber a origem real desses materiais que passaram por catadores no lixão e, na sua maioria, por catadores que ainda estão nas ruas, na informalidade, invisibilizados e que não estão sentindo qualquer tipo de efeito positivo com relação à logística reversa. Para finalizar, não posso deixar de elencar aqui o esforço do governo federal nesse momento, principalmente através do Ministério do Meio Ambiente, para tentar mudar essa rota mercadológica da logística reversa e colocar os seres humanos em primeiro plano, para depois comemorar resultados. Eu acho que tem milhares de catadores que colocam a mão nessa massa almejada por todos, mas ninguém, ou quase ninguém, faz a pergunta que é essencial, sobre quais condições essa massa está chegando para gerar os resultados que todos almejam. Então, temos muitos desafios pela frente e estamos prontos aí para discutir uma logística reversa justa e inclusiva e defendemos aqui o pagamento pela tonelada justa, que já é tardia, mas necessária para que os catadores possam usufruir dessa política pública que tantos nós defendemos aí desde a promulgação da Política Nacional em 2010.
Obrigada, Anderson. A gente teria tempo para umas perguntas. No, we don't have time for questions.
I think we do have time for maybe just 2 or 3 questions. Maybe we can keep it very short.
Okay. So he said no. Okay.
Yeah, I have a seat coming for you. It's very nice. Thank you. It's been a great panel. I've been listening from the backstage and really exciting. So we do have time for maybe just 2 or 3 questions very quickly. I do think the questions should be coming up on the screen for us. Just a moment. I'll read this one. One way informal workers have or become invisible is through a lack of data or demonstrating their relevance in the market. How can initiatives like the Brazilian Recycling Atlas help bring workers to the center of the value chain agenda in the circular economy? Who would like to field this one? Perhaps Anderson.
Bom, acho que posso responder. Eu acho que, inclusive, o país carece de dados atualizados aí da nossa categoria, né? E eu destaco aqui uma das ferramentas de suma importância, que é o Atlas Brasileiro da Reciclagem, né? Capitaneado pela própria ANCAT, pelo ORIS e outros parceiros, que tem, ao longo dos anos, aí, contribuído muito para ter as evidências necessárias para a boa política pública ser exercida. Obviamente que tem outros atores que também estão caminhando para essa geração de dados, principalmente consistentes, né? Eu acho que os dados hoje do país, eles são tanto quanto divergentes, né? Principalmente quando você parte para o índice de reciclagem, muitas vezes é 2%, saiu dados de 8%, inclusive porque mapearam a participação dos catadores autônomos. Eu sei que aqui nessa plateia tem catadores autônomos aqui, que representam uma massa gigantesca na catação e que merecem o devido valor, e é através de ferramentas como o Atlas da Reciclagem, que precisa, inclusive, de investimentos para buscar ainda aprimorar esse conceito de dados reais da nossa categoria, mas, sem dúvida alguma, apostaria que o Atlas é uma ferramenta que deve ser levada em consideração de modo a trazer visibilidade à nossa categoria.
Posso comentar uma? Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
So just to add that I think that data it's an issue not only in Brazil, but everywhere. And I'm sure that in the other regions as well. So here in Latin America and the Caribbean, at the Latin America and the Caribbean Circular Economy Coalition, together with Circular Economy, we did the first regional circularity gap report. We launched it in 2023. It has we use the global methodology to deliver one regional report. And one of the key findings is that we don't have enough data to actually run the estimates of how circular is our economy in the region. So we don't have the data from the countries, not on waste management, not on production. So it's quite difficult to advance on the policies if we don't have the data backing up the decision. So I think this is a general call that we need improved data to advance on circular economy. Considerando, agora uma pergunta que chegou para a gente em português, considerando a importância dos catadores e das catadoras dentro da gestão de resíduos de qualquer município, como vocês enxergam o papel dos catadores e das catadoras dentro da gestão dos resíduos orgânicos? E como podemos fortalecer essa agenda para que os catadores e as catadoras estejam mais integrados? Imagino que cortou aqui. Aí, bom, Anderson, se você quiser comentar, mas acho também que a gente pode dar a palavra, porque imagino que seja o mesmo, tenhamos os mesmos desafios nas outras regiões.
Bom, para ser bem breve e dar oportunidade aqui para minhas companheiras, né? Eu acho que esse evento aqui já deveria, né, ser um baita exemplo da participação dos catadores com relação a esse tipo de resíduo, que muitos até consideram como lixo, né? Temos aqui no país bons exemplos, cito aqui o pessoal da combosa seletiva, que está inclusive nesse evento fazendo todo o trabalho de prestação de serviço voltado para o orgânico, né? O fato real é que basta acreditar em nós catadores, né? Sabemos fazer e fazemos há muito tempo, mas precisamos de oportunidades em pé de igualdade. Então, num evento grandioso como esse, tem que acreditar no potencial e na capacidade dos trabalhadores catadores, que podem ter certeza que entregarão um serviço com excelência, assim como a combosa seletiva ao final dessa jornada. Tenho certeza que quem os contratou sairá muito satisfeito.
Obrigada, Anderson. Manisha?
Okay, yeah, maybe if I could quickly add, indeed, for economies like ours that are commodity-based, a lot of waste will also, a lot of agriculture waste, which is biodegradable, forms the bulk of what the waste pickers deal with. And indeed, we see in the circular economy roadmaps that we're designing for the 4 countries that we are piloting with, agribusiness is #1 on the waste management. And so there's an opportunity right there. About the bulk of Africa's GDP is agro-based. So there's a huge potential for that. What we see again in the business incubation startups, a lot of them are in that space. So there is a lot of skills that are there that need to be skilled up and scaled up in terms of technology. There's a whole lot of black soldier flies projects, products that are turned into different, whether it is juices for food in the waste that is therein. So there's opportunities and value chains. I think what is critical is to ensure that there is a very clear skilling along the value chains. What we see currently is a disjointed effort. Some people joke that in most of our situations, we produce what we don't consume. So all our coffees goes to Europe and gets to Starbucks. And then we consume what we don't produce. And so there's a lot of supply and lost value chains there. And I think with this effort, we could do more. So, Nisha, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And first I'll say is that already, many experiments going on where waste pickers who once, exclusively worked with recyclables, once they are organized, also get involved in dealing with wet compostable waste. So composting programs that are also then plugged into urban agriculture and growing food more locally and addressing food security concerns for waste picking communities. And there have been some initiatives in this regard in India. And again, you need municipal support, right? You need space to do composting within the city. You need space to grow food within the city, and this is where public policy comes in. But I also wanted to very quickly add a point on the data. So I think what is really admirable about the Brazilian Recycling Atlas is that this is a data that is being produced by waste pickers, but also being owned in common by waste pickers and others. Because I think today there's a tendency to turn everything within the circular economy into a commodity, commoditized data, marketized data. But a vision for a more social and solidarity-based circular economy is also about making sure that this is shared and held in common. And that includes the vital data we need for planning and enacting the circular economy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manisha.
I think maybe just keeping an eye on the time, I would love to have more time to do questions and answers. I think we could really be here for another hour, and it would be extremely interesting. Unfortunately, we are coming up to a close, and I do want to give enough time to our final speaker. He's going to give final remarks, so I'll hand it over to Severino Lima, who will join us on the stage in a minute. But thank you very much again to the panelists. I really appreciate it.
Oi. Boa tarde a todos e todas. Bom, que legal, né? Que evento maravilhoso, que parte do evento estupenda, onde nós, trabalhadores informais, formais, organizados, desorganizados, em toda parte do mundo, aqui representado num evento que eu considero aí para esse ano um dos maiores eventos que a gente tem, independente de eventos na ONU, na UNEP, seja onde for. Esse evento, para mim, me dá muita alegria, que é um evento que traz o que é a sinergia do trabalho dos catadores do mundo. Estou aqui representando os catadores da Aliança Internacional. Tivemos uma assembleia em maio do ano passado. Isso quer dizer que a gente tem um ano de trabalho, apenas um ano de trabalho, mas com toda a força do que a gente constituiu aqui no Brasil e na América Latina, para a busca do reconhecimento do trabalho do catador. Olhe bem, eu estou falando reconhecimento. A gente não quer inclusão porque nós já estamos incluídos. Nós estamos incluídos no sistema, em qualquer sistema econômico circular, linear, o catador está aí. A gente não está cobrando a inclusão porque a gente já está em plantas, no lixão, nas ruas. A gente quer o reconhecimento dessa profissão. A gente quer sair da invisibilidade, que antigamente as pessoas só viam o catador nos grandes centros urbanos como a pessoa que atrapalhava o trabalho dos catadores. Esse painel que eu vou apresentar para vocês é muito mais significativo em termos visual, porque é um pouco da história de como chegamos aqui, como o Anderson chegou aqui, como a Nancy, que está aqui presente, também representando os catadores informais, como a Suelen, como outros catadores do mundo que estão tendo o prazer de assistir essa apresentação estupenda, que a gente agradece imensamente aos coordenadores, por meio da Sônia Dias, que é uma grande pessoa que conhece o trabalho dos catadores, que reconhece e traz esse trabalho para a visibilidade, tirando na invisibilidade, que estão assistindo nesse momento. Está aí com muitos comentários das pessoas, inclusive porque a gente é a primeira vez que a gente apresenta os catadores da América do Norte. Que em muitos eventos a gente está com as delegações dos Estados Unidos e diz que lá não tem catador. Na China não tem catador. Na Europa não tem catador em toda parte do mundo, até no Alasca tem catador. Em toda parte do mundo tem catador de uma maneira ou de outra. Existe uma pessoa que recolhe aquilo que a sociedade joga fora como rejeito, ou que não usa mais, e esse catador ou leva para reciclagem ou leva para reuso, que é o caso dos nossos companheiros europeus. Então, a gente tem aqui a construção da rede latino-americana de catadores. Somos 19 países, Foi daí que saiu toda essa potência a nível internacional, porque a gente não se contentou em se organizar só no Brasil, a gente não se contentou só em organizar a América Latina, a gente queria mais, a gente queria chegar aos amigos da Ásia, a gente queria chegar aos companheiros catadores da África, e a gente queria mostrar para o mundo os catadores da América do Norte, do Canadá, dos Estados Unidos, e hoje a gente tem essa responsabilidade de não só mostrar, de representar. A gente representa esse tanto de organizações e esse tanto de continente que está aqui presente, né, de alguma forma ou de outra, pelo um trabalho que foi feito há mais de 20 anos. E as responsabilidades da organização é promover a discussão da construção de espaço, promover a participação da questão de gênero, empoderamento do trabalho dos catadores, fazer com que uma catadora de Portland, do Oregon, como eles falam lá dos Estados Unidos, em uma reunião da UNEP, do INC1, no Uruguai, onde tinha uma delegação americana, dizendo, no, have our speakers nos Estados Unidos, e ela vai lá e diz, eu sou catadora, eu sou do Oregon, eu sou de Portland, eu sou da Grand School. Então, isso é muito impactante, e hoje, o que a gente consegue fazer a nível internacional é isso, impactar as pessoas para que ela tenha essa visibilidade. Na verdade, ela não conhecia, porque muitas vezes elas estavam nos seus espaços urbanos, colocavam o seu lixo na porta e simplesmente sumia. Só que ela esquece que esse material, como disse o nosso companheiro Anderson, 90% disso volta para a indústria recicladora. Aí são alguns fóruns e conselhos internacionais que ao longo desse ano, um ano de aliança internacional constituída, lógico que a gente trabalha muito mais antes que isso, há quase 20 anos, e a gente tem esses conselhos internacionais, o qual eu, com as companheiras que fazem parte dos Office Bars da Aliança Internacional, que é a Sushila Sebel, que é da Ásia, e a Madi Koena, que é da África do Sul. Inclusive, semana que vem a gente vai estar se encontrando, porque a gente não parou o trabalho é de transmitir para os outros companheiros, sim, eu posso, sim, eu tenho que me tornar líder para que as pessoas vejam o meu trabalho e reconheçam o meu trabalho. E aí foi a finalização da nossa Assembleia, 1º de maio, alguns eventos super importantes, o qual o protagonismo do trabalho do catador do Brasil abre referências a nível internacionais, participação nas assembleias da OIT. O ano passado a gente teve o prazer do presidente Lula, pela primeira vez, né, nesse mandato, foi visitar a OIT durante a Assembleia, e eu estava lá no cantinho porque me colocaram que todo mundo sabe que o presidente Lula tem um carinho espetacular pelo catador. A gente tem a Aline que está aqui presente, e se não estiver aqui, mas deve estar em algum lugar aí, que foi quem colocou a faixa do presidente Lula, e eu estava sozinho quando pensei as companheiras da informalidade, pessoal da StreetNet, HomeNet, das trabalhadoras de casa, do lar, vieram, Severino está ali, vamos para lá que o Lula vai estar lá. E aconteceu isso, que foi muito bonito, o presidente correu para cumprimentar o catador do Brasil e cumprimentar o trabalhador informal, e isso transfere conhecimento e intercâmbio de experiências. Aí a gente tem um trato muito especial com o nosso corpo de governo, aqui no Brasil e fora também. A deferência que o Anderson fez aqui ao Ministério do Meio Ambiente, Secretaria-Geral da Presidência, Senais, são vários órgãos de governo, a gente estende ao Ministério das Relações Exteriores, o qual nomeia, a gente faz parte oficial pela delegação do Brasil na discussão do Tratado Internacional de Plástico, e eu sou quem estou lá para fazer essa responsabilidade, que não é só mais do Brasil, é a nível internacional. Os embaixadores, a gente faz sempre esse trato de quando chega no país, relacionar essa relação de responsabilidade, respeito e reconhecimento do trabalho da Presidência da República. Somos muito bem recebidos nas embaixadas. Aí tem um pouco do que foi o NC em Paris, no Quênia, em Ottawa, o embaixador de Ottawa, o embaixador do Quênia, Silvinho, que eu chamo de Silvinho, o cara chama o embaixador de Silvinho, né, o Silvio Almeida, que abriu as portas para os catadores. Eu tive que levar 40 catadores do Quênia, tiramos o pessoal lá dentro do lixão, vamos lá, a gente vai ter que estar junto e conhecer lá o trabalho que é feito com os catadores. Aí é o trabalho da OIT, que é muito importante. A gente está voltando para Genebra agora, dia 4. Esse ano é o ano internacional do cooperativismo. Estamos trabalhando muito fortemente a informalidade, né? Aí a gente não representa só os catadores, nós temos os trabalhadores de plataforma, os streetnets, né, que são os ambulantes, as trabalhadoras de yoga e as domésticas. E aí foi uma oportunidade como essa que a gente está tendo aqui, em que a gente foi chamado para fazer a fala no fechamento do G20 Social. Ao nosso lado estava o Cher, quem vai ser o coordenador do G20 Social agora na África, né, que não tinha G20 social, isso é uma criação do Brasil, e o Lula pediu para que o pessoal da África do Sul fizesse da mesma forma, e aí a gente fez uma fala em nome de todos os trabalhadores. Aí são as nossas participações na COP, ali com o Rei Charles, né, a Fundação Ellen MacArthur teve a oportunidade de a gente estar como catadores num evento sobre meio ambiente no Palácio de Buckingham, e aí é um pouco do que a gente está preparando para o futuro do trabalho dos catadores a nível mundial. Pagamento por serviço ambiental a nível mundial. A gente quer que o recurso venha para os catadores. Existe pagamento por serviço ambiental de crédito de carbono, que todo mundo fala de crédito de carbono, mas ninguém quantificou ainda quanto que os catadores, o trabalho deles gera de economia para o meio ambiente, e é isso que a gente quer. Nada para a gente sem a gente, né? A gente fala isso, que tem que ser constituído com o trabalho dos catadores. E uma coisa que a gente aprendeu muito e quer deixar aqui marcado nesse evento é que ninguém fica para trás, nenhum trabalhador informal. Muito obrigado a todos e todas, obrigado pela atenção. Obrigado, Matthew, thank you so much, Matthew. Obrigado, Soninha, e muito obrigado.